Hello Kanna, welcome to the new video. Firstly, let us revise what we had studied already in the first two videos. First and foremost, to develop the nation, the government needs two things, power and money. Power comes from the constitution and money can come from three sources. What are the three sources? Government's own business, taxes and borrowings. We are concerned about taxes. What are taxes? Tax means the money charged by the government on products, income or activity to meet the common welfare expenses. Taxes can be of two types, direct tax and indirect tax. For direct tax, the example is income tax, and for indirect tax, the example is GST. Direct tax is charged on income or wealth, whereas indirect tax is charged on goods or services. In direct tax, the incidence does not pass. It means the direct tax cannot be recovered from any other person, whereas indirect tax incidence passes to the end consumer. It means the indirect tax can be recovered from the end consumer. Lastly, direct tax is a progressive tax in which the rich are taxed more, poor are taxed less, and indirect tax is a regressive tax wherein all are taxed in the same manner. Okay, the power to levy tax comes from the constitution, but before levying the power, the constitution places a restriction. What is the restriction? In Article 265, it states that no tax can be levied except by way of law. It means what? To collect tax from the people, firstly you should have a law. Okay, then who can make the law? It is given in Article 246, Schedule number 7, which has three lists: Union list, State list and Concurrent list. In Union list, if there is any item, then the Parliament has the power to make the law for that item. In State list, if there is any item, the State Legislative Assembly has the law. And in Concurrent list, if there is any item, then Parliament and State Legislative Assembly, both of them will have combined powers to make the law. We are concerned about Union list because in Union list only there is entry number 82, which states income tax on income other than agricultural income, and income tax is our subject. Hence, the power to make the law on income tax is given to the Parliament. However, the Parliament cannot make the law related to agricultural income. Then I asked you in the last video only that who has the power to make the laws on income tax for agricultural income, and the answer is that is given to state. So it is contained in the state list. I think the entry is entry number 46. I am sure that you would have checked from your end also. You would have gone through the union list, state list also, and you would also have gotten even more idea as to what are all the other different items in union list, state list and concurrent list. If you have still not gone through, I would recommend that after this video is complete, you can go to Google. You can search for all the three lists, that is union list, state list and concurrent list, and definitely view them. You will get a good picture, and definitely you should have this general knowledge being a citizen of this country also. Okay, so this is what we had studied. Now let us come to income tax law. The core subject is going to start from now. Okay. Sir, how many introductions, sir? First you gave your introduction, then you gave introduction to income tax. Now you are telling that now only the income tax is going to start. Kanna, for most of you, income tax you are going to study for the very first time. Hence, this much intro is definitely required, so that if the base is strong, then definitely the building is also going to be strong. So let us come to income tax. I told you in the last class itself how the law is passed. Firstly, a bill is brought into the parliament by a member of parliament, then it is passed in Lok Sabha, then it is passed in Rajya Sabha, and finally after getting the signature of the president, it becomes act. Similarly, Income Tax Act was also passed in 1961. Income Tax Act 1961. So this also was introduced in the form of a bill, okay, income tax bill. Then it was passed by Lok Sabha, then it was passed by Rajya Sabha, then it got the signature of the president, and lastly it became Income Tax Act. This Income Tax Act was passed in 1961. So sir, before 1961, was there no income tax at all? Answer is no, Kanna. Before 1961, there was a different Income Tax Act. But the current Income Tax Act that you are going to study was passed in 1961, which is even followed till date. Okay. So, however, there is some rumor that, not rumor, a strong news that a new income tax act can also come into picture in the next year or two. So maybe you will be studying Income Tax Act 1961 for your inter, and you might study a new Income Tax Act for your final. So you have to be prepared for that also. Okay. Now, so this Income Tax Act was passed in 1961. Before that, there was an earlier Income Tax Act which the people were following. For example, Income Tax Act 1922. 1922 was the act before the Income Tax Act 1961. Now, this Income Tax Act came into force from 1/4/1962. It was applicable from when? 1/4/1962. Sir, but this act was passed in 1961. Why did it become applicable from 1962, that is 1 year later? Answer is, it is not 1 year later, Kanna. It is 1961 only. However, we will study as 1/4/1962 because of assessment year concept. Okay, this I will link it with assessment year when I am teaching that concept, and then you will be able to understand better. So for now, let us keep this discussion pending. We will discuss when I am teaching you what is the meaning of financial year, previous year and assessment year. Okay. Now, you might also have one more question. Sir, you are talking about income tax law. The parliament has the power to bring income tax law. And now you told about Income Tax Act. Correct? Income Tax Act. Sir, what is this income tax law? What is this Income Tax Act? Are both the same? Answer is no, Kanna. Income Tax Act and Income Tax Law are totally two different things. Okay. Sir, then why are you using these two terms simultaneously? Sometimes you tell Income Tax Law, sometimes you tell Income Tax Act. It is because Income Tax Act is not Income Tax Law, but Income Tax Act is a part of the Income Tax Law, or you can say component of the Income Tax Law. Okay. So here I want you to write on the top of the page, Income Tax Act not equal to Income Tax Law. Income Tax Act not equal to Income Tax Law. It is only a component of the Income Tax Law, and it is the first component of the Income Tax Law, and it is the most major component of the Income Tax Law, which only contains most of the language from which the law is derived. All the other components are only supporting the Income Tax Act. Okay. So Income Tax Act was passed in the Parliament in 1961, and it came into force from 1/4/1962. Now, let me tell you some more things about the Income Tax Act. The Income Tax Act is divided into three categories: chapters, sections and schedules. Chapters, sections and schedules. Chapter is nothing but a group of section. Like how you are having chapter in your syllabus, and in that chapter you will have so many subtopics. Similarly, even chapter as per income tax is nothing but a group of sections which has many sections inside it. Okay. Then what are sections? Sections are only the core of the Income Tax Act, which contains the language of the Income Tax Act. The language of the Income Tax Act, or the language for any law, is called provisions. What is it called? Provision. So you might hear me telling provision word, you might hear me using the word provision so many times. What is the meaning of provision? Provision means the language, nothing but the wordings that are there in the income tax law. Okay, and for any law for that matter, in any other law also, the language is called provisions of that law. Hence, whenever a question is asked, it will be asked to you in the examination, answer with respect to the provisions of Income Tax Act. Okay, so the language is called provisions. Now, these provisions are only categorized into different sections. Here I have written 298. Does it mean that the Income Tax Act has 298 sections? Definitely no, Kana. Life is not so easy. The numbering of the section is only from 1 to 298. However, there are not 298 sections. There are way more than 298 sections. There are 500 plus sections in the Income Tax Act. Sir, but the number is from 1 to 298. How can there be more than 500 sections? Answer is because it is not necessary that the numbering is only from 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. The number can also be like 10, 10A, 10AA, 10AAB. So these are also different types of sections. Hence, all these combined, there are more than 500 sections in the Income Tax Act. Okay. Sir, then what is schedule? Schedule means some additional information contained in the forms of list or otherwise. See how we studied schedule number 7, which contained 3 lists, correct? List 1, list 2 and list 3. Similarly, even Income Tax Act has schedules which contain additional information wherever required. So this is the schedule. Now let us talk in deep about the sections. Okay. Sir, what is a section and how to read a particular section? Let me show you a section. This is a extract taken from the Income Tax official website. Okay. And here we are talking about section number 6, which is talking about residence in India. So this is the heading of the section. This is the heading of the section, and this entire wording of the section is only called provisions. This is called provisions. Okay. Now, what is this called? This is called section 6. Section 6. And there might be many sub parts of a section. Now, what is the sub part of a section called? For example, here you are seeing subpart number 1. Now, what is this subpart called? This subpart is called subsection. Subsection. Now, there is a subpart to that subpart also. What is this subpart of the subpart called? It is called clause. What is this called? Clause. So, if I want you to read only this line from here, then what will I tell you? I will tell you, please read section 6 subsection 1 clause A. What did I tell? Section 6 subsection 1 clause A. So this is a clause. Similarly, there can be subpart of clause also. In this A also there can be subpart 1, subpart 2, etc. All these subpart of a clause is called subclause. Subpart of a clause is called subclause. So, if you read something like this, if you see something like this, then how will you read it? This is called, or you can write it in your notes also. Please come to your notes. I want you to write here 6 1 A 2. So this will be called section 6 subsection 1 clause A and subclause 2. Please write section 6 subsection A clause subsection 1 clause A and subclause 2. Noted down. So let us come back to this section. So this is how a sections might contain different parts. Okay. So what is this section, Kanna? This section obviously we are going to learn it in the residential status chapter, but in brief, this section contains the rules and regulation to determine which are all the people who will be considered as resident in India and who will not be considered as resident in India. So resident or non-resident, how to decide, it is given in this section. Okay, so there are different conditions given in this section. All of these conditions in combined we have to read and derive a meaning, so that we can understand who is a resident and who is not a resident. Okay, if there are a few things which are going above your head, don't worry at all. As and when the course progresses, you will be able to understand each and everything. Okay, so when I am taking the class right now, try to grasp in as much as possible. But if at all there are still one or two things which you are not able to understand, be patient, be calm. Definitely as the course progresses, you will be able to understand. Okay, so this section determines, see for example, here it is given, an individual is said to be a resident in India if he is in India for a period of 182 days or more. So first condition they are giving, that if individual has to be resident, he has to stay in India for more than 182 days. Then there is a second condition. What is the second condition? It is telling that having within 4 years preceding that year been in India for a period amounting to 365 days or more, and for a period amounting to 60 days or more in that year. So these are two conditions. This I will be explaining to you in detail when I am taking residential status chapter. But right now I just want you to understand, see there are two conditions which is given, and both of them combined you have to study to know the meaning of that particular provision. Means what is the provision here? It means which individual will be considered as resident in India and who will not be considered as resident in India. Okay, now let's come back to our introduction. So this is section, subsection, clause and subclause. Now please tell me, how will you read this? How will you read this? If your question paper contains something like this, how will you read this? Most of you might have answered section 2, subsection 1 and clause A. However, you are totally wrong. You know how to read this? This will be read as section 2, clause 1, subclause A. Section 2, clause 1, subclause A. Sir, but you only told that subpart of a section will be called subsection. Now where is the subsection, sir? I know, sir, you have gained a little bit of weight, but that does not mean that you should eat up this subsection. Answer is, I did not eat it, Kanna. It is just called section, clause and subclause. Now what is the reason behind it? The reason is that whenever there are two subsections, the subsection together should give a combined meaning of that particular section. However, if there are two parts of a section which put together, it is not giving a combined meaning, then you cannot call it a subsection. It is directly called as clause. It is directly called as clause. For example, section number 2. Section number 2. If you come to section number 2, see here, I have given you the extract of section 2 also. Sir, this section 2 extract, section 6 extract, etc. is not there in your syllabus. If you want, you can go to the income tax government website, and from there you can download these sections and you can also view them. Okay. So see here, this is section 2. Section 2 contains a list of definitions. List of definitions. Definitions means what? What is the meaning of the different words that are used in the Income Tax Act? So that is only definition. Now if you see here, first the definition of advance tax is given. Then there is 1A, subpart 1A, which gives the definition of agricultural income. Then if you see, there is 1B, which gives the definition of amalgamation. Then there is definition of additional commissioner, then additional director, and so on. If you see this list, you will know that this is advance tax definition and the second one is agricultural income definition. Is there any link between agricultural income and advance tax? I think the screen is not displaying properly if I'm not wrong, but please bear with me for this video alone. I will try to rectify this mistake from the next video onwards. There is some technical issue, I think. Okay. So, is there any link between advanced tax and agricultural income? Answer is no. Here in the first subpart it is giving the meaning of advanced tax. In the second subpart it is giving the meaning of agricultural income. You should read both of them separately. There is no link or interconnection between each other, and hence you cannot call this as subsection. You cannot call this as subsection. What you should call it? You should call it as clause. Sir, so how will we know whether a section should be read as subsection or clause? Answer is by reading that section only, by understanding that section only, you will be able to realize that whether I should use the word subsection or directly I should use the word clause. Okay. But let me give you a small trick, that in your syllabus, wherever you read section number 2, section number 10 and section number 47, you are not going to tell subsection, you are directly going to tell clause. So section 2, clause 1, subclause A. Okay, no need to tell subsection. However, for all the sections which are other than these sections, you have to tell subsection. For example, section 6, subsection 1, clause A, subclause 2. You get my point? So I hope you are clear. Sir, then what is subclause? Subclause is nothing but a part of the clause. So clause is a part of a subsection, subclause is the part of a clause. Now, sir, what is proviso? What is proviso? Proviso means exception or conditions. Exception or condition. For example, if there is any provision or any section which wants to exclude a certain type of people, or they want to put some additional condition for some section, then they will use a proviso. Proviso always starts from the word provided. It always starts from the word provided. Let me just pause just a second. I think the issue is solved now. Okay. So proviso starts from the word provided. From the word provided. Let me give you an example for a proviso. We'll jump to section number 2 and let us talk about the definition of company. There is company definition also, which we are going to learn in a few classes time. So there is company definition in the Income Tax Act, which contains different items, whom and all will be called a company as per Income Tax Act. Here if you see fourth point, see here, any institution, association or body, whether incorporated or not, whether Indian or not, which is declared by general or special order of the board to be a company. So what is it given? Here there is a list, who and all will be considered a company as per Income Tax Act. Now if you see the fourth point, it is given that if the board decides and gives an order that someone will be considered as a company, then they are also included in company definition. But see here, there is a word provided below this section. This provided means it is a proviso. So this paragraph will be called a proviso paragraph. Okay, this is called a proviso. Now what is the proviso in this provision? Provided that such institution, provided that such institution, association, body shall be deemed to be company only for such assessment year or assessment years, whether commencing before first day of April 1971 or not, or after that date as may be specified in the declaration. So what is it given? So the section is telling that if the board declares that a person is a company, then that person will be considered as a company. But there is a provided. They are using the word provided, and after the word provided they are telling that it will be considered as a company only for the respective years. You should not consider it as company for all the years. It should only be considered as a company for respective years. So like this, you should study the proviso. If this you are not able to understand, no problem at all. But I just want you to understand the concept of proviso, that first there will be a language in the section, and after that, if there is any paragraph which starts from the word provided, it will contain an exception or condition for that particular section. It is called proviso. Right? Next, let me tell you about explanation. Explanation is also a content of the Income Tax Act, or for any law for that matter, and explanations contain clarification. Sometimes what will happen, that there will be a section, that section might be confusing. The people might not be able to understand the section clearly, or sometimes what happens is the lawmaker will have some thought in mind while drafting a particular section, but the people, while the section is implemented, they will be understanding in a different perspective itself. So to clarify, the act will also contain some explanations. These explanations will be introduced inside the Income Tax Act, which will give a clear meaning as to how you should read this particular section. For example, even in section 6, you can see there is an explanation. In case of an individual being a citizen of India who lives in India, so there's so much language is given. So this explanation helps us to understand exactly what the section is trying to talk about. This is only the explanation meaning. While we are actually studying this section, you will be able to understand it better. Okay. So that time you link with this concept, and then you will have a complete picture of the income tax provision. So let me summarize everything for you. I told you about Income Tax Act. Income Tax Act was passed in the Parliament in 1961. It came into force from 1/4/1962. Don't look at the screen, look at my face. I know the screen is distracting you. Income Tax Act came into force from 1/4/1962. The Income Tax Act can be divided into chapters, sections and schedules. So chapter is nothing but a group of sections. Sections only contain the provisions of the Income Tax Act, and schedules contain additional information. Now sections contain many parts. Those parts are called subsection, clause, subclause. So how will you read this particular line? Section 6, subsection 1, clause A, subclause 2. However, in certain sections, the subsections do not have any link with each other. In such case, you cannot call them as subsection, you will directly call them as clause. So section 2, clause A, subclause, clause 1, subclause A. I gave you the example of definition section. Then I told you about proviso and explanation. Proviso contains some exceptions or conditions, and explanation will give clarification so that you can have a complete meaning, or you can have a clarity about that particular section. Fine. So this was about Income Tax Act. We will wind up this video here, and we will continue our discussion in the next video. Okay, till then, take care. Bye bye.